All right, hey everyone, we're back. I guess you could call this a new season of Peak Human. I'm recording a bunch of new episodes, took a little break there. Please go back, listen to all the old ones, work your way backwards, work your way forwards, whatever you want. See the whole journey. This one's part of the journey too, with my buddy Brad Kearns. He's been in the health and fitness world forever, has a long history as an athlete, interviewed hundreds of people on his podcast, written books, worked with some big names in the space, done a lot of good stuff over the years, and has had a similar path to me. And now he's come to the light. I feel like we're really on the same page. This diet stuff's a constant evolution of thinking. I think we're figuring a lot of things out. It's almost like it's the final boss. Everything makes sense. We've learned all the lessons. Of course, we're still going to progress, but everything with ancestral past kind of lines up with the research. And this way of eating feels great, checks out. Took a while to get here, but I think it all makes sense. Take a listen to this one. He really gets it. We go into a lot of great concepts. Support the show. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/peakhuman. I have nosetotale.org with a bunch of great products like our body care, our skin food, deodorant, hair care, all kinds of stuff made from beef tallow. Really clean, just essential oils, beef tallow, a little bit of natural oils. It's great. And of course, Nose to Tail meat, regenerative meat. So support us there. But let's get straight to the show. Hope you enjoyed this one with Brad Kearns. All right, live with Brad Kearns. How's it going, man?
We're so live. We are so lit up right now. And finally, we said we better turn on record because we started getting heated up.
Oh, yeah. We can't waste all our good content. Let's do it. Tell us who you are. Give us some context. Brag a little bit. You did some things with Mark Sisson. You've done some cool things in your life. Let's hear it.
Oh, well, how long do I have, Brian? Let's see. I'm trying to be a peak human, man. That's all. That's my main goal right now, is just keep performing, even as I get into the older age group. So I've been an athlete for my whole life, and my past was really framed by this incredible journey of reaching my dream of becoming a professional athlete. So I was a college runner. I got injured and sick all the time. And then I found this wonderful sport of triathlon back in the 80s. And it wasn't much of a professional income opportunity back then. It was this fringe sport that was just starting out. But I was so passionate about it and picking up these new skills after my distance running background. I learned how to become a racing cyclist, and I learned how to become a swimmer. And I was training and going to these races and getting my butt kicked by the best guys, but worshiping the amazing, athletic ability that the great triathletes had. And so I dreamed and kept training. And then one day I decided to go for it. I was in a miserable job working for the world's largest accounting firm in a high-rise building in downtown LA and driving in rush hour traffic for an hour each way. And I said, there's got to be something better than this. And so I announced to the world that I was going to become a professional triathlete. And it was complete folly at the time, because again, there's not much income out there, especially if you're 6, 8, 11 minutes behind the best guys. But I was so happy to be pursuing a compelling goal and emphasizing the process of the journey and enjoying the process of getting better each day, regardless of the fact that my outcome was not where I dreamed it was. And I'm mentioning these attributes because these have really been the greatest lessons that I, live every day. And they all came from learning the results of the lessons of success and failure in a really intense and dramatic manner as an athlete. And then something amazing happened in my very first year as a rookie professional triathlete. And it was that I upset the 2 top ranked guys in the world in this big showdown race. And so I went from nobody to a guy who had just shown that he could beat the best guys. And that launched a 9-year career on the professional circuit. So I traveled around the world. I had some great heights. I was national champ and I was number 3 ranked in the world at my very best. And then I had a lot of setbacks and challenges and mistakes that I made where I was following my ego instead of my best interest in my long-term development as an athlete. So all these things came into the mix and kind of launched a career where I've been coaching, writing books, involved in the health and fitness and diet, working closely with Mark Sisson for a long time. Your listeners definitely know and love him. And actually, I should mention that Mark was my coach when I competed on the pro circuit. So he had these novel ideas back then where he would, be working with me on my training plan and say, you should really rest and take it easy in between those hard workouts or after those big races where you fly across the world. And he came up with these ideas like key workouts or breakthrough workouts where you just push yourself once in a while and then you kind of train within your capacity most of the time rather than going out and racing your training partners every single day and then thinking that's a way to develop the body. So under his tutelage is how I was able to climb up these ranks and compete against the very best guys in the world and get that little tiny edge where I was more rested and training more intelligently than maybe the next guys who were super strong and more genetically talented than me. But I was able to, make the most out of my body and minimize the breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury that happens when you get into overtraining. And again, I'm teeing up more conversation for us as we talk about how people maybe not necessarily want to compete as pro athletes, but can do things within healthy, balanced life. So I retired at the age of 30, Brian. I was worn out and beat up from all the traveling, the racing, and then I pursued a career really in writing, sports nutrition, educating spinning instructors, all kinds of fun stuff. But Sisson and I have been building and promoting this primal blueprint movement for many years and wrote a bunch of books and published other authors' works to drive the ancestral health movement.
I love it. Yeah, the ancestral health movement, that's where we're at. Okay, just want to cut in for a quick second to remind you about nosetotail.org. Get meat delivered right to your door. Regenerative meat, the best meat from Texas. My ranchers have been doing regenerative ag for 30 years. All the beef comes from that one family. They figured it out 30 years ago, and they're still doing it. So order yourself some stuff today. Get the Beef Tallow body care products, hair care, all kinds of stuff. If you want to put it on your body, you should be able to eat it because your skin soaks it up. It is like food. That's why we call it skin food. So use stuff that you could eat. That's what we got at nosetotail.org. Now, back to the show. Thanks. I love that part because we're trying to do it in the film and balance it where it's like, hey, we're not saying go live like a caveman. We're saying there's modern science that proves that human evolution, all these things that we did throughout history were beneficial and it makes sense. Maybe not all of them, but yeah, like 95% of them probably do work.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think it's important, especially since most people listening are highly informed about what the movement means and can get past the ridiculousness that you have to work through when you're talking to your new acquaintance at the gathering or sitting on the airplane and saying, didn't cavemen die when they were like 33 or something? Yeah, they did because they got eaten by the lion, but that really doesn't negate the philosophy. But I think one thing that we have to be careful of today is this fascination with the resiliency of our ancestors and misinterpreting what the evolutionary rationale is. And one example might be our ancestors didn't eat fruit in the winter, and neither should you. Because it wasn't available during that time of year when it was cold. And so our bodies aren't really adapted to consume and process this many carbs in the winter. And I had this as one of my sticky notes on my door. I was taking notes from, all the podcasts that I listened to, and I looked at it and tried to honor it for many years because I also didn't want to buy blackberries flown in from Chile to minimize my green carbon footprint. And then I was reflecting further and realizing we don't have a freaking winter today because my winter, I turn the lights on at 5 p.m. when it gets dark and I artificially lengthen my day into a summer type experience year round. Furthermore, last winter, Southwest Airlines had a flash sale for $80 flights one way from the West Coast to Hawaii. So we bought 4 different trips to Hawaii and went and visited my sister who's a new resident of Maui. And so all these things, going into a brightly lit gym and putting weights on the bar and lifting those weights during the winter or going out for a sprint workout, all these things are distancing from the ancestral experience such that, and I can get fruit in the winter, and it's very nourishing and it helps me perform and recover from my high intensity workouts. So that's just one example of where we want to adapt the lessons and the inspiration from our ancestors. But one thing that I'm really thinking about a lot today as I process all this information is we know what's possible, and we might want to ask what's optimal. So what's possible for me is I can head out in a fasted state and slam a 1 hour CrossFit type workout or one of my high intensity sprint workouts, and then come home and fast for 3 more hours to get the autophagy benefits and whatever stated goal I'm doing. And then sit down for a meal, and let's make it a ketogenic meal so I can start making some ketones and get some anti-inflammatory and all those wonderful benefits. That's possible, but it might not be optimal for my long-term development and performance and recovery pattern as an aging athlete. It might be too stressful when I start stacking all these modern stressors rather than use them as tools and always look at that big picture of what is optimal today with all the advantages and things that I have my hands on, such as consuming fruit in the winter if I want a healthy, nutritious meal with nutritious, easy to digest carbohydrates.
Yeah. Well, you got right into our main topic today is yeah, like kind of reevaluating what this healthy diet is. A lot of people started in this world of lower carb keto, and then maybe this evolution is going towards more fruit and like just less of this stress on your body, less extreme fasting. And yeah, it's interesting how this stuff works. There are movements kind of, like these big worldwide kind of movements where it's like, oh, paleo, that's a thing. And maybe that was 15, 20 years ago. And then it's like, oh, what is this? Like keto. Then it's like carnivore, and you keep going and learning. And I always try to just stay above it and try not to buy into anything too quickly, evaluate it, look at why things work and not just jump on a trend. And there's a lot of sense to this new thing you're talking about, which is maybe not overdoing it, having some more carbs, having some more fruit, some stuff that's the good kind of carbs, right? And then being more just stronger, better. So many benefits to doing this, and I've done it for 2.5 years now. So tell us a little bit more about your journey, because you did do the keto thing, fat adapted, all kinds of stuff. You wrote books about it with Mark, right?
That's right. And I think we need to zoom out for a moment and look at the big picture and where just about everyone's coming from. As you present so compellingly on the trailer, losing your parents and seeing the pain and suffering that we've all been touched by with the listening to conventional wisdom, following the standard American diet, even jumping into typical fitness industry mores and recommendations has been largely disastrous for many enthusiasts. And so if we're stepping away from the mainstream approach to accelerated demise, suffering, and early death, we're going to be doing ourselves a solid, no matter what it is. I'm good friends with your neighbor, Rip Esselstyn. His life's work has been to promote the vegan style lifestyle, there's so many good things about all that he's done and all the people that he's touched. And we have a massive fundamental difference of opinion when it comes to eating the most nutritious animal foods that have fueled human evolution for 2.5 million years. But that doesn't negate the fact that if you go into his house, there's no junk food. His kids aren't eating sodas. He's not answering the doorbell for Domino's Pizza. And so any step away from a diet that has nutrient deficient processed foods in it is going to be a huge win. Last week, I sat down with Thomas DeLauer, a YouTube sensation who he used to weigh 300 pounds. So it's not going to fly if I start talking to someone who's got metabolic damage, is struggling with excess body fat, elevated disease risk markers in the blood, and start talking about this nuance. So everyone has to start from that entry door into the Sapiens headquarters. You open the door and you say, get rid of this processed food that's killing you. then we can start looking at optimizing and turning the various dials. And so I don't take back anything that Mark Sisson and I have said about the amazing wonders of the ketogenic diet to support fat reduction, to improve blood markers really quickly. Same with a strict carnivore diet for people who are suffering with gut dysfunction that they don't even understand what it is, and excess body fat, and all these things can be corrected through restricting the unfettered access to indulgent foods that we all exist in. And that's the part that um, everybody can embrace, and also kind of come to this fork in the road. And I think the fork in the road is, do you have metabolic dysfunction? Do you have excess body fat? Are you struggling? And if the answer is yes, then we just got to get rid of processed foods and emphasize nutritious foods, do more general everyday movement, not necessarily worrying about an intense and devoted fitness regimen, get more sleep, all these things that are, set our appetite and satiety hormones to start working better. And in that case, I can go all the way over to the vegan camp. Like I mentioned, Ripper, we can talk to a strict carnivore next week on the podcast, and I'll be nodding my head for 95% of the commentary. But you asked me about my journey, and yes, I've dabbled in all kinds of different restrictive diets. And even back when I was a triathlete, I think it was a grain-based, high carbohydrate diet. I wouldn't recommend it today. And knowing what I know now, I would have optimized things and been ordering more food from you instead of eating, huge bowls of pasta and cereal in the morning. However, I had developed tremendous metabolic flexibility because of my fitness level. So back then, we'd fool around once in a while. And one day I rode 100 miles with no calories. And I was a carb eating machine day and night, but I was still able to have that fat adaptation where I could get through and pedal my bike over mountains and on a difficult course for 6 hours. And so the fitness level kind of wipes away some of the adverse aspects that you're not eating perfectly. And that still goes for today. People like to demonize sugar, and I like when Ben Greenfield makes his little quips like, hey, you know what, sugar burns in the cell for energy when I'm slamming weights around in my gym, so it's not going to kill you to have a bowl of handmade ice cream and walk down the street. What's the place in Austin that we go for handmade ice cream? It's
Oh,
there's so
I
many good
don't.
places. There's one right
Yeah.
across the bridge, and it's, when you go for a special treat, a social experience, and you order up some handmade ice cream that they made in the back without all the chemicals and all the preservatives and the seed oils that you find in the store, it's not going to be a strike against your record as a healthy human. It's going to help you enjoy your life. And then the next morning, burn that glucose in the cell and go about your busy, happy, healthy, energetic life. And so my journey today has landed me at a place where I'm striving for maximum cellular energy status at all times. I want to be as active as possible. I want to perform and recover, and then I want to perform again and recover again, especially as I get into the older age groups. I'm 58 years old now. So my number one goal is to be fit and strong and explosive for the rest of my life. My fascination is sprinting and high jumping, as you know. So now I'm kind of an explosive power sprint athlete rather than the endurance athlete I was in my past. So in conjunction with that goal, I want to minimize all the other stress inputs into my daily life. And some of that stuff, as we all can understand, is always going to be there. So, raise your hand if your life isn't stressful enough today. There's not too many people. I'm talking about the chronic stressors like, lawsuits and traffic jams and global pandemics and all the things that cause us to have something on the stress scoreboard. Therefore, when I'm looking at diet, I'm looking to eat as Dr. Tommy Wood recommended many years ago. It took me a long time to absorb this amazing recommendation. He said, I want you to eat the maximum amount of nutritious food as you can in order to turn up all those dials and make me an active, healthy, energetic human that performs and recovers well. So the maximum amount of nutritious food, not the minimum, but the maximum. And he says, eat as much food as you can until you gain a pound of fat, and then you dial it back a little. And that's
Yeah.
when you know that you've discovered optimal, again, for a healthy, energetic, high performing human, where I have my body composition is okay, my blood work is okay, I don't have that concern that I talked about when we were back at the fork in the road, saying if you have too much fat, it's also not going to be the recommendation to reduce calories and burn more calories working out. We know that that's going to cause all kinds of compensation factors. So it's more about if you're carrying excess body fat, or guys in my age group are dealing with the spare tire problem, it's mainly going and cleaning up the diet and getting rid of the processed food before we talk about calories or macros or any of that stuff.
This is good. Yeah, let's break it down a little further, because I've woken up to this idea of we want to be able to eat more calories. We used to eat more calories. It's kind of hard to know, but by some of the food data, I talked to with Brad Marshall about this. He was looking at some old data in the 40s that we ate more calories, but we were still thin.
Oh yeah,
right? You want to be able to have this high metabolism. Yeah, I know people that they're stuck in this keto for so long, they can only eat like 1,500 calories a day as a woman, or I think, it's just like they're stuck in this low metabolic rate. And you don't want that. You want to be able to burn a lot of calories, but still be fit. So wait, let's rewind a little bit more too, just to emphasize what people can do who are not in great shape. Because I feel like this movement, this new kind of fruit and like pro-metabolic, whatever you call it, just eating more healthy carbs, eating more calories, it's a little bit of the fit people, right? That's the people who are already fit, they're already working out. So I still think if you're not in that state, if you have some metabolic damage, you have some extra fat, what do you suggest? It's like you said, you don't regret anything that you guys wrote over the years. And I still think people should start there. It's like, okay, clean up your diet, get rid of the processed foods. Let's get rid of carbs for a while, maybe.
I'm thinking of this quote that really floored me from Dr. Robert Lustig, multi-time best-selling author, one of the world's leading anti-sugar crusaders, among other things. So very highly respected physician out of UC San Francisco. And he said on my show, and I pinned him against the wall through the Zoom screen and said, "Are you sure about that, man?" And he said, "Look, if you don't eat processed foods, you can't get fat. You can't get sick. You can't get type 2 diabetes. You can't get metabolic syndrome. It's impossible." And that's kind of an eye opener, because a lot of people might have a comeback for that. Mark Bell had a comeback when I mentioned that to him. He said, "Oh, I can eat so many steaks that I will get fat. I'll throw Robert Lustig under the bus." But he backs this statement up with a lot of research and science that it's the processed foods that are disrupting our appetite and satiety hormones and prompting us to overeat. There's great books about that. Rob Wolf and Stephan Guyenet and people are talking about the wiring and how the hyper palatable modern foods will cause us to eat the whole bag of potato chips and all that stuff. And if you think about it, practically speaking, raise your hand if you've ever eaten too many steaks and felt like crap, and it ruined your evening, or had too many eggs in the morning and it disrupted your healthy, energetic day. It's almost impossible to overeat on nutrient-dense foods that have a tremendously high satiety level and actually nourish your cells and tell your brain that switch is off and now you feel great and you've had enough food. So I really buy into that quote, and it really helps us focus on the problem at hand. And even someone who's struggling, like you teed up the question with, we might even ask them to make sure that they're fully nourished so that they can get some of those dials that are down on level 2, get those back up to 5 or 6. And so that they do feel like walking at a brisker pace when they head out to the parking lot to get something in their car and then back into the office, and they go up 3 flights of stairs rather than take the elevator. Because a lot of that restrictive dieting, this is Dr. Herman Pontzer's book, Burn. He says reproduction, repair, growth, and locomotion are a zero-sum game. So if you borrow too much from one, for example, locomotion, that encompasses all exercise, fitness aspects. If you're training too hard with your 4 times a week at CrossFit, and then on the weekend you dedicate that to a long run, what's going to happen is your body's going to compensate by turning down the dials of reproduction, growth, and repair. Reproduction meaning libido. And in the most dramatic example of how the body does this, we look at the elite female athletes with low body fat. and they commonly experience the disastrous condition of amenorrhea, the loss of menstruation, and that causes bone loss, and that causes them to get injured and be on the sidelines. And it's the body does not want to suffer in the manner that we're putting it through by restricting nutritious calories. So I think step one is cleaning up the diet. And then step two is making sure that you're well nourished to go out there and be more active. And maybe we could call that step three is like, okay, that's fine that you're in the gym or you signed up for your class or you're doing fitness endeavors, but we have this scientifically validated condition called the active couch potato syndrome. And that's where they've done research on devoted fitness enthusiasts who get into the gym regularly and slam out an hour spin class or a personal trainer session. So this is a fitness category of people who have otherwise sedentary lifestyle patterns. So they do their 6 a.m. spin class, then they get on the subway for an hour, then they sit at work for a day, and then they come home and enjoy their leisure time on the couch, maybe grabbing a Ben & Jerry's because they get that free pass from doing the 6 a.m. spin class. And so with all these other sedentary forces in life, they are showing this active couch potato syndrome that the fit person has similar blood risk factors and disease risk factors as to someone who is truly sedentary. This is why you go to the starting line of a marathon. And they did a study in the Cape Town Marathon that Dr. Timothy Noakes talks about however many years ago. 30% of the participants in the marathon were outside of healthy body mass index. So we have marathoners who are carrying a lot of spare tire and excess body fat because their training patterns and their consumption patterns are overly stressful. And that is putting them at the same body composition average as the fans on the sidelines, because the World Health Organization says 30% of people are, overweight or obese. Some other stats I've seen are way higher than that. But when you can't discern the spectator of the marathon from the participant in the marathon, we realize that the marathon community has a problem with their approach to living, where a lot of them are sedentary because they did their 6 miles in the morning. And that's a big risk factor. So getting more active, getting up and moving around, doing these miniature workouts, I call them micro workouts, and I'm so fond of those. And we'll talk more about fitness and fitness approach, but it's the simple stuff that gives you the biggest return on investment, getting more sleep, all that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, being more active throughout the day is so huge. I just love to just always be moving around, like take calls, just walk around. Like I hate being in front of the screen. This is the only time in the week where I'm in front of the screen is with a podcast with people like you. I have to do it, but I want to move. And that's it's so different. I read the book Burn, Herman Poncer. Yeah, I mean, basically he's saying that there's this compensation, like you said. Yeah, these hunter-gatherers don't actually burn that many more calories than the average Americans. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
So that's not the problem. I mean, yes, everyone should exercise, and yes, of course, you should move your body, all these things, and exercise is great. It's just if you think you're gonna somehow work off all your bad diet by just exercising, that's not gonna work, because that's just not how the body works.
Yeah, I remember when I was training so hard as a triathlete, and I'm out there, 4 to 6 or 7 hours each day, burning so many calories. Like the rest of my life was so sorry ass. It was hilarious. And I tell this anecdote that I lived 6/10 of a mile away from my mailbox, and I would drive to get the mail every day. I just ridden my bike 84 miles over mountains, and then I'm home and I'm too lazy to perhaps pedal that 0.6 to go to the mailbox or even walk it. And so I was on the couch, or I was out there burning an excess of calories such that my repair, growth, reproduction were all toned down in order to try to survive this extreme training regimen. So in other words, in terms of health, longevity, disease risk factors, I wasn't doing myself any favors with that extreme training regimen. And as we know from, we've been talking about this in the Primal Blueprint for a long time, the ideal fitness regimen would be one of a whole bunch of low-level aerobic activity that's comfortably paced, and then some sprinting and some resistance training where the workout is very short in duration and very challenging and explosive and putting your body and your muscles to pushing toward near maximum and asking for that fitness adaptation. But what we see instead, as I talked about with the fitness industry, is this chronically overly stressful workout patterns where they're asking you to come back again and again, push your body a little bit too hard for a workout that lasts a little bit too long, is a little bit too stressful, and then prompts an overconsumption of especially those indulgent processed foods in the hours afterwards. So we're stacking a stressful workout or fitness protocol on top of a chronically stressful modern life. And that's why a lot of people who have been really well-meaning and devoted to try to get themselves fit have had attrition and failure because the approach was completely off. And it goes back to just, model Brian and walk around more and take your calls on the move. Mark Sisson and I are working hard to promote this new shoe line that he started called Paluva. And I think he's already been on your show talking about the wonders of barefoot living. But he's become obsessed with walking. Now that he's in the older age groups, he's not running any more marathons and having this completely enlightening revelation that just walking every day is a fantastic workout and a fantastic centerpiece for a healthy, active, energetic lifestyle, way better than going to these extremes and trying to beat your time in the marathon. And I think that's, if you love doing that stuff, we can't take that away from you, but we do have to acknowledge that extreme endurance training or extreme fitness devotion of any kind is going to come at great risk to your general overall everyday health.
Mm. Yeah, now my workout week, I kind of focus on my recovery. Most people focus on the opposite. It's like, what if you focused on your recovery and then every workout you do will be maximized. And then your recovery is actually when you actually build back your muscle, right? That's when all these good things happen, is after the workout, right? And your muscle tissues repair and you build back stronger. So I do these short 25 to 30-minute workouts twice a week. That's all I do. The only resistance training I do is less than an hour a week. The only gym time is less than an hour a week till failure. I do compound movements to failure. I do drop sets. I've developed this routine. I've talked to a lot of these guys like Stu Phillips, Professor Stu Phillips, people know of him, or Dr. Keith Barr. Some of these like researchers that research this stuff. They're like, hey, just go to failure. You don't need to go. I think it was Keith Barr. He was the strength training coach for the Michigan football team. And he's like, so he put them on some kind of plan it was similar to this, and then also did it himself. He said, yeah, I blow into the gym. I do one set for each muscle group and I leave, and it's like, this is all you need. It's like, and sprint too. Yes. It's like sprint, but I listen to my body. Am I ready for a sprint? Am I really sore? Then I'm not going to sprint. If I feel good, then I'll sprint. If I don't feel like sprinting, yeah, I can go for a walk. I'll just go for a few miles, walk, listen to audiobooks, listen to podcasts, and it's amazing.
Yeah. And since I've been spewing all this wonderful advice during the show, I should admit here that I might as well have an L written on my forehead right now because I've been injured for quite some time recently from sprinting, running related injuries. And I feel like I failed myself and I failed my recommendations because the injury is a sign of overdoing it. But I get so excited and enthusiastic when I get out there and push myself. And it's a joy for me to, exercise my body and try to discover my limits. But we really have to carefully regulate our competitive intensity to have the best overall fitness experience. And so I made, I guess, a succession of mistakes to the point where my foot needed a minor surgery. And it's an interesting reflection now to think, well, of course I was doing too much, but I talked myself into, hey, I can handle another workout. And once you get warmed up and get the juices flowing and the adrenaline going, you kind of don't notice the warning signs of your injury. You really only notice those the next morning when you wake up. And I was kind of lamenting to the surgeon that did my procedure, and she's a world level competitive amateur triathlete. So we're definitely talking in jock speak. Dr. Katie Galato, Lake Tahoe, she does the U.S. ski team, travels around and takes care of those guys. And she's going, yeah, well, the tendons fool you when they become inflamed. And I'm like, oh, that's the most profound quote I've heard in many years. When you get warmed up and pumped up, that's when you go and wreck yourself, because the warning signs disappear when the inflammation kicks in and you're able to perform superhuman feats in the gym. And so now I am measuring my competency, resiliency, ready state to perform first thing in the morning when I take my first few steps down the hall. And as I told the doctor, I've been shuffling down the hall for the last 40 years. What are you talking about? I'm never bouncing around in the morning, but I've learned to, increase general everyday movement. I talk so much about my morning exercise routine. That's been a centerpiece of my life. And I do the same regimen every single day, hitting the deck and doing a variety of flexibility, mobility, core strengthening exercises. And that's my fitness baseline from which I start not only all other workouts, but start my day with some basic activity. And that's the kind of stuff that will, carry us through, far superior to a crash and burn type of experience that a lot of times the fitness industry lures us into, thinking this is the way to go, that we need to go and crush workouts and high five our training partners and get all sweaty and then take a picture for social media. And those things might be a young person's game. And I talked to my super athletic, enthusiastic son, like, maybe you're deadlifting too frequently if you have that swollen area of your mid back from pulling the bar. Everyone likes to push it, but we got to put that plug in for longevity, especially here from your 58-year-old guest. This stuff catches up to you over years and decades. So the way I messed up my foot last year from too much high jumping, I could do that any time 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I'd jump out of the stands at the youth track meet when the high jump was over and then take a bunch of jumps myself before they cleaned up the pits and everything. And it was no problem. I could do bare feet. I could do anything. Now it takes me 45 minutes before I can even take my first approach, because I want to get everything all oiled up and ready to go.
Well, yeah, you got to think the long-term game. I'm getting there. I turned 40 a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, now I'm thinking about this long-term game for sure.
Now you're thinking about the 40 plus multi-sport competitions. You're going to pick off those poor old guys.
Oh yeah. Well, I missed the 39. I wanted to compete when I was 39. Well, actually, no, now I'm in the younger bracket, but so I guess it is better that I'm 40. So I'm on the younger end of the new bracket.
Yeah.
But I kind of hung up the cleats for a little bit, but I did do a pentathlon in the Masters Championships in Toronto before COVID. And I started pole vaulting again. And yeah, we were talking about some stuff, sprinting again, high jump. So yeah, you're still doing it. You're still doing the master stuff.
Yeah, I think you got to have something to light you up and nurture that competitive intensity throughout life. That's why I say on my website, pursue peak performance with passion throughout life, because I really want to stand for that these days. And looking back, I told you about my wonderful triathlon competitive career decades ago, and everyone's got a story and everyone can talk about back in the day. Yeah, I was going to play QB for the Longhorns, but then I messed up my shoulder my senior year. Like, everyone's got their story and they're sticking to it. And then they're turning on the TV on Sunday and watching the NFL for 13 hours. And that's sort of the norm for how we experience our timeline in modern life. But what's great is that it's never too late to get in shape, to challenge yourself with a competitive goal. And if you're not the competitive type, I'm not saying you need to sign up for a track meet, but perhaps you can aspire to climb the highest peak in your state one time this summer and practice for it in the dark, rainy hours of the winter with your exercise partners, where you're going in and you're doing some squats and you're thinking about some challenge that you face in the future. Because modern life is chronically stressful, and we have all kinds of hassles like lawsuits and things that we have to face and deal with. And then we have this muting of, actual healthy human challenges and things that bring out our competitive spirit and make us strong and resilient and delay the aging process, because we're giving ourselves these challenges and adapting to them. So whoever you are and whatever your interests lie, do something that's challenging, that pushes you out of your comfort zone, and ideally has a long runway so that you can say, yes, I am practicing for this summer's hike up a challenging peak. I'm not sure if I can do it. I'm scared about it. And those are things that are actually super positive to keep in the mix every single day as we experience increasing comforts and toning down of anything that resembles, unsafe or sketchy circumstances. That's good. But when we're going and turning the thermostat to whatever temperature, speaking of neutralizing winter, all I have to do is go push a button, and then the cold, dark, scarce winter of our ancestral past has disappeared.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with modern society. It's like you have to figure out how to not get too comfortable. And I mean, yeah, that's I always play sports, but I get it. Not everyone plays sports, but that's a good tip, is to have something in your future that you are working towards that can push you, that can, I mean, humans always were pushing themselves. This is just a part of being human. I kind of reframed my thinking about it actually when I went to Africa and saw the hunter gatherers and spent time with them. And it's not that we should exercise and it's good to exercise. It's required. It's just like a baseline requirement that you need to move your body. Right now, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, like it's great. Like, yeah, you should exercise. No. It's a baseline requirement to at least walk every day, like a certain amount, just a
Yeah.
baseline requirement. And we're too
Well
soft.
said, man. Yeah. And you just said it. So those listening, push rewind and hear that again. Because I don't think we fully appreciate, like, the Homo sapiens is built for near constant everyday movement. And that's proven by going and seeing how our last remaining primitive living humans are operating. And so if everyone could get over that hump and realize it's not an option, it's a requirement. And the research that fascinates me is, like, when you have these even short periods of stillness. Like, I think the thing I cite a lot is that there's a study that says 20 minutes of stillness will produce a noticeable decline in glucose tolerance and an increase in insulin resistance. So you start getting dysfunctional fat burning after only 20 minutes of sitting on your butt. And you also get a noticeable decline in cognitive function. And the brain research reveals that we can only truly concentrate on a peak cognitive task for around 20 minutes before we require a break. And if we don't take a break because we're so badass and we're working on our proposal for 2 hours straight before the deadline, a break will be taken for us where we'll be a little spacey, lose concentration. For me, it's jumping over to YouTube and watching high jump instructional videos and great competitions from the past. It happens to me. I can't control myself because I've been working on my book for 2 hours straight without taking a 5-minute break to go walk, look at distant objects with my eyeballs, and all those important things. So to move somehow from optional or beneficial to absolute requirement, I love that talking point. And for me, I am putting peak cognitive tasks into my mix. I've written a lot of books for the last 20 years. I've pretty much been nonstop writing a book, I realize now, for the last 20 years. And if I'm not super duper sharp, I'm going to do a shitty job on the last paragraph. And so for me, it's very graphic and noticeable when my cognitive performance declines. So like you probably, I'm bouncing around all day long, man. I'm like a jumping bean. I'm here, I'm there, I'm sitting on the ground, I'm at my stand-up desk, I'm buried into the couch in the most comfortable laptop position ever. And then I'm outside, and then I'm taking a 20-minute nap, which I do most days, because when I come back, I feel like it's morning and my cognitive performance increases dramatically. So I'm as busy as the next person, or maybe not, but I want to, get through my day as efficiently as possible too. Matthew Walker's book and other people who are sleep researchers are talking about if you get insufficient sleep as a pattern, you slow down by 20%. So on the workday, that's an extra hour added onto your workday because you're a sorry ass, because you're not sleeping enough. And so everything you do takes longer. But guess what? You don't realize it because your perception of your diminished function is declined because you don't sleep enough. It's sort of like the story with the cushioned elevated heel shoes that ruin your proprioception and cause you to run or walk with poor form. But you don't notice the impact trauma that's 7 times greater when you're wearing an elevated cushioned shoe versus barefoot. Because your proprioception is compromised. And so it's like, I feel fine wearing my Hokas and running 13 miles with this great cushion and padding. It's because you're not feeling, and this is Dr. Daniel Lieberman from Harvard, one of the great barefoot researchers of the world. It's 7 times more impact trauma dispersed inappropriately through the lower extremities when you wear cushioned elevated heel running shoes as it is when you run barefoot. It's a mind-blowing assertion, and almost everyone can go out there and say, no, that Harvard researcher, world respected, is full of crap. I feel fine running in my cushioned shoes. It's because you can't feel it.
Well, it's kind of like if you're drunk, you don't know you're drunk. Your inhibitions are loosened.
I can drive. I'm just fine. Yeah,
exactly. It's the whole thing. It's like part of the thing is that you're not noticing it. That's the whole thing. You're not perceptive of it. So
it's like me contending that I'm completely uninfluenced by advertising, and I chose this Nike sweatshirt because it fits well and I like the color. No, they've been pounding Nike swoosh into my brain since I was a little kid.
Yeah. Well, I like your branding. You got your yellow going. I wanted to talk about what's possible versus optimal. And I'll tie in my pentathlon. Well, I was actually training for decathlon, but yes, I did get injured because I was overtraining, and I was going too hard. And I competed in a high school. It was a bunch of like young guys in high school, and I was trying to keep up with them. The first event was 100, and I just totally ruined my hamstring. Anyway, I did a pentathlon in Toronto without eating. I did not eat that day, and it ended at 5 or 6 p.m. And everyone there was guzzling the little goos and eating granola bars the whole day. So I did it, right? It was great. I got second place it was good, whatever. It's possible, right? But is it optimal, right? I did it to see if it was possible. And I trained fat adapted, and I was at the UCLA track blowing these guys' minds. They were the multi-athlete guys that I was training with. And they're like, wait, but where do you get your carbs? I'm like, well, I'm not eating carbs. And they're like, but where do you get your carbs? And I'm like, well, you can run on fat. So anyway, you and I have long experience being fat adapted, and it was great. And you have all these benefits, but maybe it's not good for longevity or good in long periods. And yeah, that doesn't really seem ancestral too. We didn't do anything for long periods. Right. So what is it? Let's talk about the difference between what's possible and optimal, because you touched on it earlier. And maybe it's not good to do all the workouts and then be doing like extreme cold plunges. You said you got up to, 6-7 minutes, like 38 degrees, something like that. Yeah, I'm not down for that. It's possible, but is this optimal? Like, are you stacking too many stressful things in your life where you're doing extended cold plunges, then you're doing extended races and extended lifting sessions, and then you're fasting? Oh, I can't eat before noon because I got to do my autophagy. It's too much.
Yeah. And, guess who is attracted to these types of challenges and lifestyle practices? It's the most driven, goal-oriented, focused, type A, peak performance minded person that says, what can I do to get healthier? Let me stack on as much shit as possible in the pursuit of, excellence. And we certainly don't want to remove those wonderful positive attributes for the peak performance person, and you can't anyway. People are going to do what they're going to do, but we do have to manage this carefully. And I love that opening statement. It's like, just keep asking yourself what's optimal instead of just what's possible. And back to that ancestral example, Marshall Salin's noted anthropologist, and he quoted the term hunter-gatherers represent the original affluent society because they had everything they needed. They weren't trying to stack possessions or compete in rat race consumerism culture. And so therefore, they did only the bare minimum necessary to survive and never more than that. They did not want to expend extra energy to train for the upcoming hunter-gatherer half marathon challenge. And so they would go track the antelope. You can watch the Great Dance documentary on YouTube, the first known filming of a persistence hunt where the bushmen chased the antelope down in 100-degree temperatures for 4 hours and finally outlasted the antelope and brought it back to the camp. They did not get up the next day and run 4 hours in 100-degree heat to get another antelope. They feasted for weeks with the bounty and, could relax until the next day came where they had to go looking for food. And also our ancestors worked hard so that we would have a more comfortable, productive, meaningful, fulfilling life rather than just trying to survive. And it seems as though when you look from a distance, a lot of people are just trying to get through their day and put as much stress on their plate as possible due to cultural programming, consumerism, and all those things that we might want to take a double take on now. So, you know what? It might be optimal for you to work fewer hours in the day and pursue fulfilling hobbies. Like I like to do clay sculptures of dogs. I only do dogs. If those are watching on video, I'm going to show one of my clay sculptures of a dog. And I don't sell these. They're not super great, but I'm actually pretty good at dogs. I'm not good at anything else. But I purposely go into the clay studio and hang with my buddy Eric because I know it disengages me from the tremendous pressure that I have with book deadlines and everything else that's going on. And we have to build these, I guess you could call them indulgences or diversions into life, or we're just going to turn into robots that are stuck to the screen all day, becoming ever more productive. And then that kind of mindset spilling over into health boosting practices and hormetic stressors, which can easily get out of hand. And we have to remember that the effects of stress are cumulative. So when you talk about my cold plunging, I'm a huge enthusiast. I have an online course at my website for how to get started and progress carefully into more and more devoted levels. And so I've been doing this for many years, and I was over time becoming more cold adapted with, great personal satisfaction that I could last for longer in the tub. And I got up to 6 minutes trying to set the record in 38-degree water in my chest freezer. And, getting out felt fine. It wasn't any big deal. But if you think about doing that every day, and I had gone up for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years now, where I was in most every day, putting in a good number of minutes in the cold tub. And then I realized as I'd go out there and lift the lid that I didn't really feel like doing it. I had built it into a habit because I'm such a tough, resilient, focused, goal-driven person, but it was too much. So then I kind of, I had some time away from my home base. And so I didn't have opportunity for cold plunging for a while. And, it caused me to do some reflection where, what is the purpose? Do I really need to train my brain to be a tougher guy? I don't think so. Phil Maffetone makes this point all the time. The brain does not need to be trained to suffer. If someone comes over right now and puts a gun to your head, Brian, and says, we're doing a decathlon and you're going to finish and you're going to score over 5,000 points or I'm going to shoot you, you will find the resiliency to do it. Even if your hamstring is messed up, even if you're tired, even if you didn't get enough sleep last night, we are tough SOBs when our back's against the wall, and we don't need to practice again and again and again how to suffer. It's there as part of our foundational resiliency. We may need to practice more kindness, self-care, restraint of unregulated competitive intensity. And that was the story I was trying to relate at the start when I talked about my triathlon career. It was like, I was a young guy. I was super ass competitive. I'd been beat up on the Division I college running scene, and it was a total disaster. And I barely got to compete because I was always injured and off the back. And so I wanted to take out my frustrations on my shitty coach and all the people that wrote me off and go and crush everyone in triathlon every single day. Well, that gets you a certain distance down the road. And then you have to wake up and go, why are these guys still better than me and smiling at the finish line? And I'm frustrated and feeling down on myself and feeling discouraged. That's because my approach, my mentality had gone off track to the point where I just, had like a lot of negative energy and pushing my body too hard in the name of suffering so I could be a tougher guy. And when you unwind all those things that creep into our peak performance mentality, that's when you can get into the position to achieve performance breakthroughs and actually enjoy things more along the way.
Well, yeah, and then you can still cold plunge. Absolutely, it's great. But yeah, do it for 2 minutes.
Oh, so I should continue with my cold plunge.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
had this, the chest freezer works fine for those wanting to get started on a budget. But when I got the plunge tub, and I know this is a commercial in the middle of your show, but like it's so much more inviting to use a machine that gives you circulating crystal clear water. And so I jump in that thing spontaneously all the time. I'll be walking by in the middle of the day and just go in for a 1 minute plunge. And it's so nice and refreshing. And I actually appreciate the experience. I can't say it's in luxurious like when I jump into my 104-degree hot spa after a busy, stressful day, but it has its proper place in my lifestyle now because I don't have that badass mentality anymore, and I don't associate it with toughness and suffering. And instead, another technique that I'll mention about cold exposure is when I get in there, instead of doing this macho power breathing with a stoic face and and looking at my watch and seeing if I can get to 5 minutes again, I go in there and I try to minimize my breathing. So I'm doing minimal nasal diaphragmatic breathing and thereby overriding the predicted fight or flight response, which is characterized by shallow panting breath. And the whole goal, I mean, one of the major benefits of therapeutic cold exposure is that you teach your brain to override your physiology such that it's not really a stressful event for me to get in there for 1.5 to 2.5 minutes, which is my sweet spot. I keep my water cold at 38 because I do appreciate the shock value and the anti-inflammatory and the circulatory benefits of getting into really cold water. And for me, that's really cold. For the next person, might be 55 is really cold. Oh my gosh, 55 feels like a bathtub to me now, man. But the main point here is that I'm trying to relax, smile, appreciate the experience, minimizing my breathing, and I'm moving my body around, which intensifies the sensation of cold rather than forming a protective warm film around your skin when you sit stoically in a chest freezer and think that 6 minutes is a long time. In circulating water, way less time will give you way more intense experience, and then you can get out earlier.
Yes, yes. And we have those at Sapient Center. And yeah, I mean, I've just never been into doing the super cold ones for super long. And I think now it's like, oh, this is probably because I had this instinct that it wasn't serving me, that I don't need to do that. And same thing you said about the sauna. It's not like you have to go on 190, 200, 210, try to do 20 minutes. No, just go until, you push yourself. I get it. You're not, it's not comfortable at the end, but you can't do too many things or you're going to end up actually hurting yourself, right? When thinking that you're doing something good.
Yeah, and I'm going to put fasting, a carb restriction. We'll put meat restriction in there. Restrictive eating patterns, by definition, the mechanism by which they provide the benefits to the body is activating the stress response. So when you skip breakfast and go into the office and really contend that you're in a peak performance flow state and you think more clearly because you didn't have to bother with breakfast, that's because you're activating fight or flight hormones to get you in that peak performance mindset and power through many hours of productive work without any calories. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to put that on the stress scoreboard that fasting is a mild stressor. Mark Sisson makes a good counterpoint here where he says, I'm so metabolically flexible that fasting is not stressful for me at all. I feel fine. I'm not hungry. And he sits down for his first meal at 1 p.m. That's great. But for many people who have not yet worked up to that level of metabolic flexibility, it's arguable that a healthy, nutritious breakfast, especially one featuring protein, because we have that great protein research showing that as soon as you wake up in the morning, get some protein in, or you will be possibly drifting over into the catabolic category and breaking down amino acids for glucose so you can fast until noon and work in a peak cognitive state at the office. So it's worth reflecting for a lot of people. And as I say with snarkiness on one of my videos about my revised morning routine, I have this giant bowl of fruit and I look in the camera and I say, can anyone please tell me that this is unhealthy for Brad Kearns to eat a big bowl of fruit in the morning? And I will come and, we'll throw down and get into debate, because we're talking about one of the quintessential foods that fueled human evolution, along with all the nutrient dense, high protein animal foods, is fruit. And somehow it's become demonized. As you said at the very start of the show, it's been grouped together, and the term carbs has been come to describe all the crap that we put into our mouths in the processed food world, where most of the inexpensive, nutrient deficient processed foods are grain based, high carbohydrate snacks and packaged and frozen meals. And it's important to distinguish between a nutritious, easy to digest carb and a potentially problematic, difficult to digest carb that has all kinds of collateral damage. And since we've talked about this so much on your show, the viewers can now realize that raw forms of high toxin natural plant foods might also be one of the potentially problematic categories. So of course we have Pop-Tarts, which are crap, but if you're banging a kale smoothie every single morning and feeling some stomach distress in conjunction with that, we have to take a look at the wondrous superfood kale and wonder if we really need that and if that's optimal for nutrition when we have those concerns about plant toxins.
Yeah, that's a whole nother layer there. And Saladino's been on this drum for a long time now and waking people up. Yeah, these like leaves and nuts and seeds and these things are not the easiest to digest things. The plant doesn't necessarily want you to eat them. The fruit,
Yeah.
is what it wants you to eat, and it has the least anti-nutrients. And yes, I did have problems with all the kale and spinach shakes with the almond milk, and I did that for years, and it was terrible, and I got problems, and it wasn't good. And people, it's so hard for them to give that stuff up though, and it's hard to even know if they're a problem or not, right? Because you don't really see it. It may not be outwardly shown to you, but until it's too late. I just find so many people they're so resistant to it. They're like, but they're my greens. You're supposed to eat your greens. Everyone grew up. It's pounded in your head. You got to eat your greens. You got to eat your greens. Maybe that's not true. Maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Like if we look evolutionary, not that, like I said, not that everything is completely correct evolutionarily, but what did we have? We had some little stringy herbs. Yes, eat some herbs. Yeah, eat a steak, have some herbs. Great. But we didn't just sit there with piles of spinach and kale and all this stuff. This stuff didn't exist. These are all new foods. This is all developed from all the cruciferous vegetables are from the wild mustard plant, which was this tiny, stringy little like herb thing. And now we have all these cultivated, just different crops that we've bred to become huge. And I don't know why we think this is magical for people.
Yeah. It's fantastic marketing and cultural programming. I like the wise guy comeback when Sean Baker says, look, if our ancestors were able to take down a woolly mammoth, we're talking about 3 million calories that would feed a large clan for many months. I guarantee you they weren't looking to go make a salad if they took down that woolly mammoth. And of course, this is all conjecture, but it's important to maintain an open mind. And, Saladino really got to me when he explained, like, look, these things do have health properties. And you can look up the wonderful antioxidant boost of sulforaphane from the broccoli. But I didn't even realize that the antioxidant boost that you get from these wondrous super plant foods are from the body mounting an internal antioxidant defense response against the poison. And I'm like, oh shit! I thought when I chew a broccoli that I'm actually chewing and swallowing antioxidants, because I'm not a science-based person here. And so to get that explanation, and then on top of that, to actually objectively look at the nutrient profile of a food and rank the most nutritious foods on the planet, you're looking at the true superstars like oysters and pasture-raised eggs and organ meat and the nose to tail foods. It's difficult to argue that that's where you're getting most of your nutrition. And yes, you're getting a little bit of nutrition in the salad, but I thought the salad was like, the maximum, most nutritious, most colorful diet I could get. But really, we're just getting little pennies in the bucket when we should be going for dollar bills and the woolly mammoth type of approach.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to reframe this. It's the modern lifestyle, the modern marketing, the modern everything. It's just kind of backwards. And I had a realization when I was talking to Dr. Stefan van Vliet and Dr. Fred Provenza about how these animals, like pasture raised animals that ate their ancestral diet, eating a wide variety of species, they have tons of these polyphenols and all these secondary compounds in the meat, right? So throughout history, we were getting maybe all of these secondary compounds just by eating well-raised meat. And now in this modern world, maybe people aren't eating that much meat in general, or they're getting feedlot meat and it doesn't have all these secondary compounds. This is the science that they do. They look at metabolomics and they use mass spectrometry to look at all these secondary compounds in meat. Like, oh, maybe that's why we think plants are so magical. It's because we're not getting all the secondary compounds anymore. And and then just to let people know, kind of echoing what you're saying, is there is primary nutrition. Primary nutrition is protein, and it's amino acids, it's big things, it's all the minerals and vitamins in organ meats and eggs and oysters. That's primary. Then there's like secondary sort of pathways, like antioxidant pathways. This is not like we're just eating nutrition. It's this like secondary kind of effect. And maybe we don't even need that if you are living a cleaner lifestyle too. Maybe you need some of that, but you don't need tons and tons of it because you're already eating clean, exercising, do all these good things.
Yeah, and speaking of maintaining an open mind and the concept of things being backwards, I was thinking of how, fasting delivers all these wonderful benefits, both from a scientifically validated perspective as well as the person feeling better. But it might be that you're backing into these benefits rather than the inherent benefits of not eating. And so if you've had a shitty breakfast your whole life and now you're following a fasting protocol where you're narrowing your eating window, you're getting all these amazing benefits because you walk past the cereal bowl and all the crap that's going into your body to have to deal with. Or if you're suffering from gut dysfunction and you give your digestive system a break for 16 hours a day, you're going to get a tremendous health boost because your body doesn't like to digest food because it's inflamed and damaged. But these are incidental benefits rather than direct benefits. So when you said that direct, I was thinking, oh yeah, there's so many occasions where this happens that we're backing into these fantastic benefits and becoming evangelical about something that we stumbled upon rather than directly contributing to our health.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I heard about the rodent study where the calorie restriction study that they kind of reversed that because they realized, oh, well, they're just getting it bad rodent chow. If you're eating, so maybe this is my interpretation that I heard is that if they were just eating less bad food, then they lived longer. But that wasn't really what was going on because I think they did a second study and they gave them like better food. And then the calorie restriction didn't help because, right, it was the quality of the food. And yes, if you eat less bad stuff, yeah, it's again what we say about vegans. Yes, you're eating less trash and now you feel better.
Yeah, for sure. Jay Feldman makes that good point about the rat studies, and they've done a lot of studies with the C. elegans species where if you restrict its calories, it lives this amazing, 3 times longer or something, but it basically goes into hibernation. And, we don't have human studies on calorie restriction, but somehow there's been a big notion that getting more efficient with our calories is going to help us live longer. And there's a lot of science that validates this, people. So next week, I don't want some guy slamming Brad Kearns because I'm wrong. The science is accurate, but a lot of science on this is framed in the obesity paradigm, the standard American diet paradigm. So we can do tons of studies on people, get them eating less of their shit food, and they're going to have tremendous health awakening. I love how Lane Norton calls it energy toxicity. He says the major overarching problem here is energy toxicity, which is not burning enough calories and storing too many calories. And if we start from there and go, okay, I accept that. No one's going to argue that energy toxicity is the big problem. Then we can start taking some steps to say, well, what if I move more and start increasing my intake of nutritious foods and decreasing my intake of processed foods? That could be a winning formula rather than the disastrous failure that has been eat less calories and start exercising more, because then all we do is start turning down those dials that Dr. Ponser talks about. So I kind of like the notion. I think it's better for the person to embrace that might be struggling and not all the way locked in with their lifestyle yet. Is like, don't worry about, depriving yourself of nutritious foods. Go and have the best breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever you like to eat. Don't worry about your time windows and things. Of course, we should be not eating much after it gets dark and having a period of sleeping where our digestive system gives a break. But I just heard someone the other day boasting about they're doing time restricted feeding, and I said, "Oh, really?" Yes, and they said they're doing a 12-hour eating window. I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. What was it before 12 hours? Like, but I love how now we're putting that notion out there that time restricted feeding is a 12-hour, because that's a lot more sensible than going down from I'm doing a 16-8 and next week I'm doing a 20-4 and then I'm going back to 16-8, and all that stuff is a way to back into health benefits, such as by default consuming fewer calories if you're consuming too many calories, and then you're maybe going to have a temporary loss of body fat. But again, we're backing into the results rather than just saying, again, repeating myself, cut out the processed foods and then all, rivers will flow downhill to health success, and cut out the overly stressful workout patterns. And again, you will have tremendous fitness breakthrough just by dabbling in little micro workouts and walking around, taking your phone calls on the move and things like that.
Yes. And the problem is that there's a lot of nuance here. And I get a lot of pushback because I post online a lot. And people always will say, bro, it's just a calorie deficit. It's just a calorie deficit, all that type of stuff. I'm like, I get it. I get what you're talking about. We're talking about something completely different. And that you want to be able to eat. You need nutrition. You need nutrients. You need protein. And yes, you need some energy to get through the day. That I'm going into my spiel, which I've done a lot lately. There's very different types of calories. There's nutrient calories and there's energy calories. And you should be able to eat a lot of calories. You don't want to be stuck in this low metabolism, low thyroid function. These problems develop. I had these problems. I couldn't sleep, or I'd wake up in the middle of the night and like getting cold hands and feet if you are too restrictive for too long. But so you want more nutrient calories and less energy calories. This is the big thing that no one's talking about in the mainstream. The calorie bros aren't talking about. Now Lane Norton is talking about it. We spent a lot of time with him and I discussed a lot of this with him, and he's in the film now. And I mean, he always got it. It's not like he doesn't get it. But, we just had these discussions on the difference between nutrient calories and energy calories. And it's so important because what you're talking about and what I've been talking about forever is just getting rid of processed foods. That's because they have very few nutrients and tons of empty energy calories, right? So that's the main thing. Like, we're really telling people to eat more nutritious calories. What you're saying is you're eating more nutrient dense foods. You're eating all of the good nose to tail animal foods. You're eating fruit. You're eating the correct foods that are intact and have more nutrients in them and fewer empty calories. Really, all these whole foods, they don't have empty calories, right? Like, I love that my grandma and my mom and all, it's this old school idea of don't eat empty calories. It's genius. It's genius. It's like it solves everything because it's not about calories. It's about nutrient versus energy. It's about what calories you're eating. We want more nutrition, not just less calories. And if you do these changes, then you can get that. And I get it that people like intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding, and it can work for some people. And maybe people can start it. They need to start somewhere, right? So I don't want to just throw it all out.
Right.
But if people can start doing these changes, and then they can start eating more nutrient dense foods, and then they won't have to do these techniques, maybe like time restricted feeding, and they can eat breakfast. If someone magically could start, if they were 100 pounds overweight and they could just magically eat the diet I do, then they would be all good. But I don't think they're going to do that. But they could eat 3 meals a day and be fine. And they would be eating super nutrient dense foods, and they'd be eating oysters, and they'd be having meat and eggs and fish and all these great things. And maybe fermented vegetables and, and fruit for dessert. It's like amazing, but they're not maybe going to do that right away. And then, but just know, I guess a message here is that you can use all these different strategies to get you there, get your metabolism working better. You don't want to be stuck in this restriction all your life, but maybe it's necessary for a while. I mean, right. Maybe you spent 40 years becoming overweight. You gotta, obviously you need to eat less calories, but yes, what kind of calories are you eating less of?
Yeah. I mean, this is, we can't discount the psychological aspects, the destructive psychological aspects of, standard Western diet, the food addiction that it prompts. Dr. Joan Ifland of Stanford does good work on this. And she has a checklist. I think it's 11 questions. I used to have that as a sticky note. Are you addicted to food? And she goes, guess what? All of us are starting with 5 of them, with 5 yeses. And if you answer to like 7 yeses, you have some level of food addiction. So just about all of us has a disordered relationship with food. And we have to respect that at kind of at the top of the pyramid as we're talking about these particulars. And I mentioned Thomas DeLauer, formerly weighing 300 pounds. And so, his relationship that was disorderly with food, he had to implement all these tips and tricks that he talks about and helps many millions of people, get out of the trap. Mark Bell talks about the same thing, where he used to be a big fatty guy and now he's, Rip City and running marathons. But that disorderly relationship with food is something that may be in the background all the time. And, you can't just wipe it away. And so therefore, people that, might need to stay in a little more control because of behavior characteristics. Maybe fasting is going to be the winning formula for them, and opening up the window or putting in other such rules and restrictions that work on a psychological level without regard to how they affect, you're going to slow your metabolism down if you wait till 12 to eat. That may very well be so, but it might be more psychologically adaptive to the person. So we got to do props there. And then I was thinking, as you're talking about all these aspects of calories, we have on the flip side, the fitness side and the burning of calories. We don't even have really accurate way to measure how many calories. So these are just like stand-ins and estimates of what the body's doing, trying to solve a math problem that's not really a math problem because there's so many outside variables, right? And as I talked about the triathlete who did an 84-mile bike ride and then drove 0.6 to the mailbox back because he was too lazy to get to the mailbox, the compensation mechanisms that kick in really negate the importance of even counting calories when you're talking about fitness regimen. And I'm emphasizing this now because I see this amazing quantified approach to fitness where everybody's got all this data on their watch. And I'm like coming from old school where all we had was the heart rate monitor, which is a fantastic tool to regulate exercise intensity into the aerobic zone. But the rest of it, it's like, are you kidding me? And then guess what? As you get fitter and fitter and fitter, you burn fewer calories on that 10-mile run. So Eliud Kipchoge, the greatest marathoner, greatest runner of all times, he can run 10 miles at 6-minute pace and burn fewer calories than the person in your neighborhood who's sweating and huffing and puffing trying to run 10 miles at 10-minute pace, but is massively more stressful experience and possibly too stressful to actually contribute to long-term fitness progress, where we need to be patient and be very careful working that aerobic system at comfortable heart rate.
This is great. This is important stuff, because I want to start wrapping it up here. It's like, how do we wrap up this message? Because I hate the term balance. People are like, oh, just eat a balanced diet. We just eat balance. I'm like, kind of, but that's also just, you end up with the standard mainstream, just eat grains and eat your vegetables and eat less meat. That's what people think of when balance. But all these things we're talking about, there is a form of appropriateness to human and optimal living, right? So it's not, somewhat balanced. So it's like, yes, sauna is great. Yes, cold plunge is great, but let's do it appropriately. And what is optimum? Yes, fasting can be great once in a while. Maybe a couple times a year you can fast for a day, because maybe that's what happened to our ancestors. We couldn't get food. Great, right? It's like, it's not all the time. And with the food, just having some more appropriate, I don't want to say balance, but yeah, how do you like wrap all this stuff up into like this new approach that takes nuance, takes an hour and a half podcast to understand?
Yeah. I'm thinking of the common quip, everything in moderation. And I just went nuts recently on my childhood friend who's a very high performing career person and lifelong athlete. And I was talking with some other people in a group about, hey, Brad, what's this carnivore diet thing where you just eat animal? And what's this? What's this all about? What's that? And he chimed in with, hey, look, guys, here's what it's all about. It's everything in moderation. And everyone nodded their head. And I'm like, wait a second, dude. Ricky, tell me one time in your life, you competitive freak, that you've ever been moderation about anything. You go all in every single day as a high performing individual in every area of your life. And even if we play pickup basketball, you're coming out strong with your 100% gas on your whole life. And now you say moderation about diet when we are surrounded by the demise and the destruction and the tragedy of people, succumbing to normal routine aging that we now misperceive because we're fueling ourselves with bad food. So you can see I'm doing a little tidbit of me going off on somebody for offering a helpful, seemingly reasonable comment. But we cannot apply a moderate approach to our health goals now because we are in the midst of absolute devastation and destruction of human health at an accelerated rate. So you talk about the obligation to get up and walk around. That is no joke, people. It's not an option. It's how the human needs to function, even in the brain. So we're blaming our cognitive, demand lifestyle that we don't have time to walk around the parking lot every hour. But this, in fact, makes us better performers in every way. And when it comes to food, we have to rail against the big industry that is killing us in the name of profit and doesn't give a crap about our health. And it's all about, saving money and all these things where, we're getting bombarded with marketing message. We have to fight back hard and have an extreme approach, extreme and regimented approach to purchasing the right foods. But that said, go to the farmer's market on the weekend, buy whatever you want. If you're going to try a kale smoothie, test and see how you feel afterward. And if you do thumbs up for 90 days straight, you're going to call up Rip Resselson and say, thanks for recommending that kale smoothie. It's been a centerpiece of my life. If you feel like your stomach pops out like mine does when I drink a kale smoothie, then we're going to send you down other winding paths. But at least you've started in the right place where you're like, I am taking control of my health now, and I'm choosing out of the machine that's going to grind me down. I didn't have to. I said it so Brian didn't have to. Brian takes a week off from his soapbox. All right.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I'm trying to think of a better term for it too. I hate when people just say everything in moderation. That's the most cop-out BS. It means nothing. It really is just like industry propaganda so that you could just eat a little bit of cereal, just eat Coca-Cola, drink Coca-Cola, just do it. It's like, what is it? It's appropriate balance, which means I use appropriate balance because I'm making all my meals at home 7 days a week. And then one out of, say, if I'm eating 21 meals, 20 out of 21 are amazing. And then one that is appropriate balance to me is have some food with my friends. If I'm at an event, great. That's appropriate balance. That's not, everything in moderation. No. That is way different.
Nice. Yeah.
So, all right. I think we did it. This was great. And I love all of your guests or experts you mentioned because I know most of them and had them on the show. Amazing. I'm glad you are on the similar path with me. We've been podcasters for a while, and I think you've got it all figured out, man. I love it.
I'm constantly striving to maintain that open mind and hit these checkpoints, like I mentioned with Saladino in 2019. And after hearing his convincing argument, I would make a bowl of salad or be served a salad, and I'd look at it, and he brainwashed me to where I'm looking at the salad, realizing that it's not the centerpiece of health anymore. And I never thought about a salad the same way again. I haven't eaten a salad in 4 years. And then, another guy I should mention, Jay Feldman, Energy Balance Podcast, he really got to me a couple of years ago when he emphasized the point that all these restrictive diets turn on stress mechanisms, and that's how we get the health benefits. And I'm like, of course they do. Burning body fat is a survival mechanism. It's a stress mechanism, because you're taking stored energy and mobilizing it because you don't have enough ingested food. So you're in stress mode when you're burning body fat, which we all want to be burning body fat as many hours as possible of the day. But it's a way of looking at it going, yes, especially it's good to burn off excess body fat. And when you're fasting, you're giving your digestive system a break and you're kicking into anti-inflammatory. And when you produce ketones, all these wonderful things are happening for clean burning brain fuel. But these are all stress mechanisms stacked on top of 27 other stress things on your scoreboard. So I'll leave you with the idea of like getting out a piece of legal pad and drawing a line in the middle, and you put your stress factors on one side and you put your restoration and rejuvenation factors on the other side. So we have sleep, we have taking a walk during the busy workday to disengage and get out fresh air, open space, sunlight. And we have eating a nutrient-dense, easy to digest meal that will nourish the body. And so that's helping us perform and recover from all the other things on the other side of the scoreboard. So let's get that scoreboard nice and even.
Balance.
And
we'll have to use the balance word, but yes, balance the scoreboard. And man, I wanted you to have that last spiel, but I had one last thought. It's when you want to go into fat loss, yes, if you need to burn fat, support yourself with the most nutrients possible. That's the best way to make it not stressful. Support yourself with the most nutrient-dense foods. Get the most nutrition packed in with less energy so you can let your body burn that body fat. That's the best way to do it. Not just starving yourself, not going on a juice fast. You're not supporting yourself with the proper nutrients while you're in that fat loss mode.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
All right. Sorry, I had to take that last little bit.
Yeah,
I just was like, that's it. That's it. All right. We did it. Thanks so much. Where can people find you?
The BRAD podcast. I love connecting with people. You can search for the Brian Sanders Show and start there. And
I was on your show. Yeah, it was great.
BradKearns.com has all fun and games, and you can see an old guy high jumping and getting enthusiastic, and hopefully make a connection. I'd love to hear from people by email, and I really appreciate the chance to connect with you too, Brian. You're doing great work, and hopefully we'll continue to fight the battle and help people open their minds and try new things.
I love it. All right, BradKearns.com. Thanks, Brad. This was awesome. I'll see you.